You all ready for the great Social Security workshop? All right. So if I can have everyone's attention, let's rock and roll here, right? Let's do this. So Social Security, that's the workshop that you're in. And it's interesting that it actually has a title that is the choice of a lifetime. And I see several of you all in here. It's going to become very personal to you regarding the decisions, including myself. It's going to become very important, the decisions that you make in order to maximize the opportunities that you have to receive Social Security. And I'm glad that you joined us today to actually have this discussion by our great presenter today. My name is Carlos Green, and I'm with NACO FSC. And our presenter today is actually going to be Carlo Cadasco Jr. He's actually been in the industry for 25 years. He's been with the Nationwide Institute for 6 years, and they actually provide retirement solutions to help you prepare for and live comfortably in retirement. And again, when we talk about Social Security, there's going to be some decisions that he's going to cover today, or some educational information that he will cover today that will really make you understand all of the options and the decisions that you have to make, not only for you, but for your county employees. And we understand that sometimes Social Security gets a bad rap about what's going to happen in the future. But right now, there are some decisions that you can make or your employees can actually make when they're looking to retire. One of the things that I want to say here is that we're doing this particular workshop here at the Legislative Conference. But if you have an annual conference at your state association and you feel like that this would benefit some of the decision makers and influencers in your particular state that could actually trickle this down to other county employees, please see me after the conference, after this workshop, so that we can actually talk about that opportunity there. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the microphone and lectern over to our guest speaker today, Carlo Cadasco Jr. Carlo?
Thank you, Carlos. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I realized that Carlos greeted everyone by saying good evening. That's because he and I were talking about drinks later, so that's already on his mind. And I'm there already, too. So thanks for coming in. I know it's a big, full-size room. I tend to like to move around and keep my hands free, so I'm not going to grab one of the mics, and I will relegate myself to the dais here at the lectern. Please feel free along the way if you have any questions to ask. I do ask, though, if they're about the topic, that's great. Let's have it for everyone. If it's about you, I will stick around as long as you need afterwards, where it might be something that you're curious or might even want to know, but with a little more confidence, so to speak, where we can have that conversation more privately. In the back of the room, I also have a few of my associates here. David Belnick and I do a lot of work together with the state of Maryland in particular. And then Deb Turner in the back. We do a lot of work with the counties in Maryland and Virginia. And so we have been very busy bringing these presentations to the different counties that we are part of, and to those that we would like to be partnered with as well. And the reason I say presentations is because we just finished downstairs a presentation on planning for healthcare costs. And that presentation, if anyone was there, is specifically designed and geared around trying to quantify what your Medicare costs may be in the future. It's easy to read a report today that will identify what the average 65-year-old couple should expect to spend over the course of their retirement lifetime. That's a good number to start with, but it breaks down from that very moment, because if you're both not 65, if neither of you are 65, and if you're not average, what does that number mean to you? Well, we've partnered with a firm that allows us to start with actuarially where you live, because healthcare costs vary by state and region. Your health history, because any medications you're taking today that you'll be taking in the future, they'll have an inflation cost built into them. So if anyone has type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, and the list goes on, we'll look at what that number is today, but I'm 56. What would that medication cost me at 65? and for the rest of my life. And building inflation into that makes it personalized for me. The health history has nothing to do with whether or not you're insurable, but what will it cost you in the future out of pocket. And the third part is what we earn, because Medicare costs are predicated upon our modified adjusted gross income, and we just got our taxes back from our CPA, and I'm always reminded that the MAGI is a lot more than the AGI because they roll back in a lot of the things that we get to take out of the AGI. So those who earn more in retirement are going to pay more for their Medicare for different components. Why do I bring that up? For two reasons. One is it's one more resource that we have to offer that help people prepare for and live comfortably into retirement. The second one is Social Security, but they are interlocked in some ways. They do weave together in a number of ways. One is, I'm looking around the room, so I'm going to ask a question. Anybody here who has parents or older siblings who are on both Medicare and Social Security? I'm being kind, right, to some of us in the room, right? How do your parents pay for their Part B premiums for Medicare? It comes out of their Social Security, right? So once we're enrolled in both, we pay for our Medicare Part B, which is medical, based on our MAGI from year to year, and that number can change, but that comes out of our Social Security. So starting with a gross number and figuring out what our Social Security benefit is a good place to start. But then we need to figure out how much of that do we get to keep. And that's where Nationwide can help you as you look at both of those resources. Someone in the early 50s to mid-50s, it's good to start running the healthcare report. Someone in their late 50s, early 60s, good to start running the Social Security reports. And it really helps with quantitating, so to speak, what it is I should be expecting to receive and what it is I should be expecting to pay, which will help me then earlier on to make better decisions about how to prepare for my retirement. So for all of you in this room, I'll present this in character for you. My hope is that when you see this, you realize, as Carlos said, this is something we could bring back to your local counties. We can bring this back to your participants. We could bring this back to your employees. And the reason I differentiate them is we all know the benefit of turning an employee into a participant, and turning a participant into an active participant is planning for better outcomes. The long and short of it is, those who prepare better for retirement are better prepared for all the different things that can come at them in retirement, and it also helps to create a better environment where they live and work and play when they're retired. So all those things go hand in hand very nicely. The other thing that our healthcare cost resource can do is it can provide you with a projected life expectancy. Again, let's just, for argument's sake, in this room, say all the men are one age and all the women are another. Well, if that were the case, we don't have the same life expectancy. Well, when planning for break-even for Social Security, should I file an hour later, how does that help us? Well, what our healthcare tool does is it provides you with an individual projected life expectancy based on the answers to those questions, then allows you, as you're looking at your Social Security options, which we'll get into now, to determine, does it make sense now to take it? Or if I don't need it, does it make sense to wait? What this won't do is it won't let you know if you take the money early and invest it and have good returns on it, if that's a better deal than not taking it now. All we're going to show you would be the apples and the apples, and that is, if I filed at 62 when initially eligible, how would that look over my life expectancy versus filing and pick a number arbitrarily at 64, or my full retirement age? Or what if I waited till 70 and I earned all of the delayed credits available to me to maximize my benefit? Now, how long would I have to live to break even? When do I go $1 in the black for waiting, and then over my life expectancy, what would that difference be, dollars and cents, versus filing any other point before that? And so we'll start with a little bit of just quick legal language on here. Nationwide's not a government agency, and this resource is not endorsed by the administration. However, we have purchased what we call the Social Security 360 Analyzer. I'll show you in the kits how you can generate a report for yourself and how the folks back home at your counties can generate reports for themselves as well. And then ultimately, as we get into this, we'll break that down. But Carlos said it. Well, why did we choose the title Choice of a Lifetime? I'll talk about that. We'll get into some of the Social Security basics. And the very end, what we'll do is what the team I work for, the Nationwide Retirement Institute, what I think we do best and intentionally is after providing education, we provide you with something actionable, something you can do with that to actually use it to make a good decision one way or the other for you. And as I get into this, we'll start with why choice of a lifetime. Does anybody remember historically how long you had to change your mind if you had filed for Social Security and then decided that you wanted to pay it back as if you had never filed before? Anybody have any idea? It was really only limited to ultimately reaching your maximum delayed age of 70. Today, it's only 1 year. It's 12 months. Go back to pre-2000, when the market was going up, and up. What everybody was doing was they're taking their Social Security benefit at 62, investing it in the market, and then when they turned an age subsequent to that, it could have been 2 years later, 4 years later, 8 years later. What they would do is they'd pull their profits out of the market, pull their proceeds out, keep the profits, pay everything back they had collected from Social Security as if they had never filed, and then turning their benefit on at the higher level. So basically, it was Social Security arbitrage, if you will, with some real baked-in risk. The good news is there really wasn't any risk in actuality up until 2000. But in 2000, 2001, and 2002, risk came roaring back. It was always there. But it just now, what happened was anybody who was doing that was in worse shape because they didn't have enough to pay it back. They were actually net deficit, right? And now they were stuck with the lower income. And so what the administration said was, this is not what this was created to do. This was designed to help people. Well, it was designed very, very differently originally, but today it's designed to help you file for it when it best makes the most sense to fit into your overall plan. So we call it the choice of a lifetime because today, from the day you file, if something happens, if you retire and change your mind or a good opportunity comes along or whatever it happens to be, you can still pay everything back within that 12-month window and withdraw your application, and your situation then is treated as if you had never filed before. And what is the benefit to taking Social Security benefits later? A larger benefit. So the basic premise for the entire rest of the next, we'll call it 40 minutes or so, is file early, benefits are reduced. File at your full retirement age, you receive your full benefit payment as determined by your earnings history. File later than that, and it's increased. So basically, if you file early, you're going to pay a premium for filing early, or it's going to be discounted. If you file later, you'll receive a premium for filing later. It's all because of actuarially the fact that half the due win one way and half the due win the other way. It's really almost a zero-sum game for the administration. So, choice of a lifetime. Here are a couple of examples we'll start right off the bat with how when you file can make a difference. First of all, we have Jim and Linda, for example. Jim is 66 and Linda is 64. Their full retirement ages are 66. So Jim is there now, and Linda's 2 years away. However, going backwards, if Jim and Linda decide to file at 62, based on what their full retirement benefits are at 66, of $1,543 and $1,171 respectively, what would they have received over their lifetime had they filed at 62? And you'll see here, it's just shy of $900,000. That assumes two things. One, Jim has a life expectancy of 85 and Linda 88. And two, we're just baking in 2.5% cost of living on average. Linearly, though. Does that make sense? So over that period of time, and those would be the baselines that we use. So Jim lives to 85, Linda to 88. They both pass away perfectly actuarially on their life expectancy date, and they've collected almost $900,000 over that period of time. However, Jim and Linda say, wait a minute, we've maxed out our 457 and we had a rollover from our previous entire retirement plan and so on, and we're still going to work a little while. We don't need that right now. What are my options? Okay, let's go to the max. So ultimately, if Jim were to wait till 70 and he didn't collect anything for 8 years, and Linda waited until she was 68 and she did what is called filed a restricted application, which I'll define for you in a few minutes. If Linda filed that restricted application, she's not collecting her own. The downside to collecting your own is once you do, it doesn't grow anymore. But technically, she's collecting 50% of his. You may have heard of some of these types of strategies, right? Restricted says you're at least full retirement age, and you're collecting half of your spouse's, and yours still grows. But it's not reducing your spouse's. So if Jim's collecting $1,543, Linda's getting, what is that, $750 plus we'll call it 22, so $772, basically, half of his. Collectively, they're getting, 1.5 times what his is. That's not bad. And what's happening is hers is still growing. And we'll talk about that. That being said, as you can see, it's over $1 million, almost $1,040,000, and that results in more than $140,000 of additional benefits for them. But here's the hard part. The hard part is Jim collected nothing at 62, 63, right? 64, 65. He was looking both ways every time he crossed Broad and Market, right? He didn't want to get hit by the bus, right? He was flossing and doing all of his wellness things, and he knew he was going to get there and this was going to work out for him, right? But what if when he went to sleep at night he worried, I don't know if that really was the best thing, and what if he was losing sleep over that? What is the best thing? Our take on this is this. We can't tell you which is right or wrong. We'll give you better information than we've ever had before. We'll quantitate it for you, but ultimately you have to decide whether or not one or the other makes the best decision. But it's better than that because we'll also give you alternatives. You can say, you know what, it doesn't make sense to take it sooner. We don't necessarily have the emotional constitution or the stomach to wait that long to take that risk. What if we decide to take it a little bit earlier? And in this example, well, same premise, same benchmarking here, same numbers, 895 if they would have taken it at 62. But now instead, they both wait till they're 66, respectively, to take it, and now they're receiving their own full retirement benefit based on their full retirement age. And so in this case, what you'll see, it's not $140-something thousand, but it's still 77, almost 78. In that case, what if Linda and Jim just said, we're going to work until 66, and then we'll stop, and then we'll take our benefits? That's a pretty reasonable scenario to believe, right? What our resource can do, what it does do, is whenever you fill out one of the forms, we'll always show you, whatever your age is, what you would receive at your earliest filing option under normal filing options, meaning not including any disability scenarios, but typically it's 62. If you've already attained age 62, then we'll just use the age that you are at that moment. What if you filed today? So that's always going to be your first benchmark. Then we'll always show what is the optimal based on your input, your data, your earnings history, your marital status, all those things. What would the optimal be for you? For Jim and Linda, it was the 70 and 68, if you remember, right? What would yours be, individually or as a couple? Then we'll let you pick any two points in between. This one is just simply Linda and Jim saying, you know, we think that 70 makes sense, but it doesn't really suit us as much. What if we would have waited a little bit longer? If it fits our plans, how would that look? And that's one of any two you can choose, and we can do up to those 4 for you. So it gives you some flexibility to really understand what your options are based on those criteria. The other thing is, we won't go into it today in any great detail, but if any of you or someone you know or are related to or work with might be subject to government pension offset or windfall elimination, we can factor that in as well. So anybody who was paying into a SERS plan where there was no Social Security paid and so on, we can also factor into what would happen to the Social Security benefit if, as the federal government says, there are 2 government pensions. So from that pension and from Social Security. So we can also accommodate that. And I'll show you on the fact finder, the questionnaire, where that would be taken into account. So that's sort of a background. That's why we emphasize the choice of a lifetime, because ultimately once you make those choices, after 12 months, you're locked in for the most part. What we'll see here then, knowing that, is that most people still do take their Social Security early. What is the most obvious reason someone would take their Social Security early? Anyone? What's that? Health, absolutely. Under normal circumstances, if you do not expect to live for a longer period of time, you want to collect as much as you can. I will say in my time doing this, I've done a lot of seminars. I've uncovered situations, though, where again, it depends, where the person in failing health is the oldest person with the larger benefit. And if you're married or have been married and you have an ex-spouse subject to collecting off of your record, that will then become the benefit of the surviving spouse. So there have been times where people haven't taken their benefit because it wasn't that they needed it, but they wanted to leave a larger benefit to their surviving spouse. So health is definitely a reason. However, if that's your situation, we can help you understand if that really makes the most sense for you, depending on what it is. Is it for you or for somebody else? And that plays into it. Number 2, they need it, right? A lot of folks who file for Social Security, for the first 20 percentile of income in the U.S., for 80% of those folks, this is their only retirement resource. So it's critical. So there are those who really need it, who take it as soon as possible. And then you have other reasons. What are some of the cultural reasons that a lot of us in this room either have said or have had people say from their experience, I'm taking it now because why? We're afraid it's what? Not going to be there for us in the future, right? And Carlos alluded to that. We'll talk about that. We spend time on Capitol Hill each year. We talk to members, we talk to legislative aides, member organizations, and we try to get a feel for what they're thinking about the future of health care and Social Security, and we'll share a couple of examples with you. But as you can see here, for those very obvious reasons, a lot of people take Social Security early. My mom and her generation, speaking very generally and collectively, my mom passed away last year at 77, the youngest of 7. My grandparents passed away in the early 70s at 66 years old and 68 years old. When they retired at 62, there was no question as to whether or not they were taking their Social Security. Their life expectancy didn't support waiting, and that's just what everybody did, right, generally speaking. So my mom grew up seeing that as well. And she filed at 62 because that's what her parents did. They both passed away and benefited from having their benefits as early as possible. And that's what all 6 of her older siblings had done as well. And so we look at that culturally, and that's called doing what people do because people do. It's a cultural anchor, right? Well, we're now the generation watching our parents living longer. My mom outlived both of her parents by almost 10 years for one and more than 10 for the other, right? I still have some siblings, she has some siblings still living who are in their 80s now. And so we're seeing that. My mom needed some help. She didn't plan for long-term care because she didn't see her parents need long-term care. It was a foreign concept, right? So we're seeing a lot of being that sandwich generation of where our parents, generally speaking, are living longer. They're the ones who are having long-term care needs, whether we're helping them in home or they're going to assisted living or they're going to full long-term care. And they filed for Social Security early, whether they needed it or not, and didn't know. We're learning that all of those decisions are important and they're all intertwined. And so whether or not now we're going to file at 62 or not has a lot to do more than just our life expectancy. It has to do with our overall income needs in retirement as well. And that's what this presentation is designed to help us appreciate. The good news is still a solid 3 out of 10 will file at full retirement age, especially those working until that age. And then a handful, maybe almost 2 handfuls, will wait beyond that. And I wonder how much of that was done intentionally or how much was just done by accident. But for those cases, we don't know if any of those decisions are good or bad because it does come down to 2 things, right? How long are you going to live and how much income do you need? And that really will collectively provide you with a better basis for making a decision in the future. So here are some of the things that are important to know. This number changes from year to year. I'm sure it's changed for 2017. Our 2017 presentation hasn't come through compliance yet. We'll have it real soon. But ultimately, what we've learned last year is that Social Security won't go to 0. The concern with Social Security, though, is that it will go down in time. The question is how much. Right now, off of last year's projections, we've got about, we'll call it less than 17 years, get to 2034. If we get there and Congress does nothing to act on Social Security, what we'll find is right now we're projecting about a 21% reduction. It's a lot better than going to 0, but tell that to the person who needs $1,000 a month is only getting $790. It doesn't work, right? It's not very good. So we're confident between now and hopefully a lot sooner than 2034 that we'll see some fixes. Some of the things, some of the major trends that we're hearing as we spend time with folks on Capitol Hill, and I'm going to skip past this. It's just my we're living longer slide here. Gentlemen in the room, if you're 65 already, 1 and 2 of you have a chance of making it to 86 and 1 of 4 to 93. Ladies, to 89 and 95. So making this decision, right, lasts with us a long time, right? And then for those who are married, 1 of you have a pretty good chance of making it to 93. I tell everybody what my wife tells everybody else. If anything ever happened to me, she's not sure she get remarried. She may get a new dog, though, because they're easier to train. Those are her words, right? I know I'm loved, right? But what I tell everybody is, and a lot less expensive, too, right? But I always tell my wife, you know what, I get it. When you come home, I'm usually the second one to the door, and I'm not wagging my tail, and so we'll just leave it at that. So I get it. I understand. All right, so that being said, we're not in the business of telling you if you're single you have to get married to live longer. Some people will live longer because they are, right? So let's leave it at that. Okay, so proposals. Number one, this one has a lot of teeth, but I think it's more bark than it will be bite. And the idea is let's reduce the amount of cost of living increases year to year. I think that's going to be a negotiation tool. I can't say with any certainty, but one of the ones that has some real good possibility is pushing out full retirement age. Now, of course, it can't be the impact anybody who's close now. And it's never been that way. They moved it out from 65 for my grandparents, right, to 66 for a lot of us in this room, and I'm 67. I'm born in 1960. I'm the first year of full retirement age, 67. So if you're born prior to that, you're 66 in so many months and so on, and we'll talk about that. There is a downside to this, though. Every time they move full retirement age out a year, they reduce the amount that you receive if you file early. They also lop off a year of delayed credits because they're still operating in a realm of 62 to 70. Early filing, maximum growth of your benefit. And every time they move full retirement age out, they take 1 year of an additional 8% growth off, and they add 1 more year of reduced benefit. So for me, if I were to file at 62, my benefit is only 70% of my primary insurance amount, which is my number at full retirement age. Those Jim and Linda's numbers. For somebody in this room, if your full retirement age is 66, if you were born between 43 and 54, that's you. You would receive 75% at 62. So what happens in the future if logically and intuitively it makes sense, this does get moved to 68, 69, and so on? What happens to the person who really needs the benefit? There are a lot of ways that could be addressed. Our hope is that would be addressed, and there'd be some type of compromise on making that work along the way. And the other two that are pretty popular, well, common but not necessarily popular, the third one is increasing the amount of income subject to FICA taxes. In 2015, it was 117. In 2016, it was 118.5. In 2017, it's 124. What that means is anybody who earns up to 124 is going to pay 6.2% on that income towards their Social Security. Those who are individually employed or self-employed are paying the full 12.4. Counties and other employers are paying the other 6.2%, and so on. So the question is how much income should be subject to that? At about $200,000, it takes Social Security out about 50 years with no other changes. At about $250,000, it will take it out the full 75 and beyond, which is typically what they want to see when they measure these types of changes. So that's a possibility. I've read a number of white papers. There was one from a senator who said, let's cap it at 200, but then above 400, let's create a surtax. Very similar to how they built revenue for the Affordable Care Act with a surtax above a certain income level. It doesn't go to that individual's benefit individually, but it goes to the benefit collectively, meaning it's paid back into the pool of dollars available for Social Security benefits. So there are a lot of things like that floating around. The real question is ultimately, what will it be? And then finally, the one that's least popular, again, the two spectrums, the one on the front end with regards to lowering cost of living, the other one raising the tax of what we are paying on each dollar. This one, again, may be more of a negotiation tool unless it comes in form of compromise. And so with offsetting something else. So we'll see. But it's a lot of fun to listen to the different ideas. It's not a lot of fun waiting for something to happen. And I know what everybody assures us, though, is that those who are collecting will typically have little to no impact versus those who might be collecting in the future. So we'll see what happens there. Okay? So that's the first portion, kind of laying some backdrop on overall, why is it choice of a lifetime? What are some things that may happen over our lifetime to fix Social Security? Now we get into the basics, and if you have that, there should be a white and orange brochure in front of you. As you leaf through there, if you want to stop at pages 8 and 9, I'm going to get there after one more slide, and I want to show you a couple things in there for takeaways. And again, as you're watching this and thinking about how it impacts you, think about this, how much this can impact your employees at your counties, respectively, and the participants, and can really help them begin to make better decisions, which also goes into job satisfaction and so on, which leads to all the positives that come from this, right? So what is Social Security, and why is it more than just a decision that stands by itself? Well, it's guaranteed income, which we all like. And as fewer and fewer may be retiring with pensions, especially in the private sector, guaranteed income becomes more important as it becomes more scarce. It's also indexed to inflation, unlike a lot of government pensions, which aren't. from time to time, and more often than not, there will be an increase in Social Security, although the last couple of years has been benign to none, right? So historically, though, it's been running at a rate of just under 3%. Also tied to Social Security, it's more than just benefits for us, but if we're married or we're married, if we have dependents who are eligible, and so on, if we're the surviving spouse of someone who had a Social Security record, there could be benefits for us or for them as well. So these decisions really they're tied together. They go hand in hand very well. So someone mentioned earlier when I asked, why do people file, and somebody mentioned health. And the answer is yes, under most circumstances. If that's you, you would. Unless you're the person who's leaving your benefit to someone else, and the longer you wait, the larger the benefit, you may want to wait. So those are the kinds of things that take it from more than just a checkers game to more like a chess game, where you have to think ahead a few more moves and anticipate more what the headwinds might be. And then finally, and we don't go very deep into this, but conceptually, it makes a lot of sense. Anybody here contributing to a 457 plan, right? When those dollars come out, what percentage of those dollars are taxable? 100%, right, are taxable. That's your effective rate. When you spend $1 of Social Security, it's only partially taxed. Not all of it is taxed. And there's a complication that goes in, a calculation that goes into it. It is complicated. But ultimately, if you can spend $1 of your own money, if you can spend $1 of Social Security, you're being taxed less rather than spending $1 of your own money. And what you're doing is you're preserving your own dollars to last you longer down the road. So these kinds of things should at least be considered when someone's considering when I should file for my Social Security. Because again, it's more than just a move by itself. It's really interdependent upon other things and will have an impact on other things as well. All right, stop there just for a moment. Just check in. On the things we've covered so far, any questions? All right, well, this is going to be sort of the meat and the potatoes end of Social Security. These are the things that are good for us to know. So we talk about a couple things on here. I'll call them my X and my Y. Primary insurance amount is my X, and we need to figure out then what is Y because they relate together. So our primary insurance amount, that's the amount that we receive on a monthly basis if we file for our benefits when we are full retirement age. So if we wait until full retirement age, the amount that we receive monthly is called our primary insurance amount. It's a funny name. It should be our full benefit monthly amount, something like that, right? Because then it would sound like what it is, and that makes a lot of sense to people, right? So Jim and Linda, that was their 2 monthly amounts that we talked about if they were to wait. So when we showed those examples of Jim and Linda, when they filed early, this was reduced because they didn't file at full retirement, they filed early. When they waited later, this was the number the increase was based off of. So what is our full retirement age then? Well, that's based on when we're born. And if you look on that page at the bottom of the page, is that page 9? Remind me, is that on the right-hand side? Yeah, you're there now. Page 9, yeah. If you look on page 9 at the bottom, you'll see that we have a scale there of how when you take your income is going to be impacted. At the top, we show you what the full retirement age guidelines and criteria are. I mentioned originally it was 65, and it was gradually brought out to 66. Now it's being gradually increased to 67, as you'll see there. The good news is you'll find your full retirement age on your Social Security earnings statement. Those statements that used to come every year don't come every year under normal circumstances any longer. The Paperwork Reduction Act ended that. However, since then, they've reinstituted statements every year if you're 60 or older until you file, or every 5 years if you're younger than 60, and it's on the anniversary of a birth date, of a birth age of 5 or 0. So 35, 40, 45, 50, and so on. So you can find that information on your statement, or, and I'll show you where you can find this, you can go to the Social Security Administration website, create a profile, and have access to your statement 24/7. Has anybody done that at all? Yeah, a few hands go up, right? Yeah, I see some heads shaking. Good. And it works very well. And so that gives you access to that. So anytime you want to start running these reports, you don't have to wait to have your statement mailed to you every 5 years and so on. So then, what is it based upon? So we have to take linear for a minute, which everything on that page is, and just discard it. Because it's not based on our linear earnings. For example, my first job out of college back in New Jersey, I worked for Blue Cross and Blue Shield. I worked in the actuarial department, and I made, I think, $16,000. It was probably like $12,000, but 16 sounds like more, right? So it was Some actuary I was, right? So anyway, today, in today's value, bring that forward to present value, what's that worth? That is the average index monthly earnings I would have had. So I would have to make more than $16,000 today to have a benefit greater than I would have received for what I earned way back in 1983, right? So ultimately, the average index monthly earnings is bringing all of your earnings to today's dollars and then applying the formula for figuring out your benefit. But it's not linear. It is the highest 35 years indexed in today's dollars. So someone who's worked 40 years, you may ask if my last 4 or 5 years, I've made a job change, I'm working in the community for an agency, I'm not making as much, will my benefit go down? And the answer is no. It'll still be based upon those highest 35 years up through your age 62, where they're projecting your income off of that. So you don't impact it adversely. However, if you're working and earning more, and any of those subsequent years are greater than any of the previous 35 in value in today's dollars, your benefit could go up. And that includes even if you're collecting Social Security. So people ask, if I'm taking Social Security and I'm working, and I happen to have years where I've earned more than in the past, can my benefit go up? And I say theoretically, yes. But unless you were making a whole lot in the past, if you're making more now, there's a pretty good chance if you're working and collecting, you're not getting much of a benefit because your benefit's going to be reduced because you're working. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes as well, how working impacts taking benefits. But ultimately, 35 highest years, it is an actuarial calculation. The maximum last year somebody could have received had they maxed out their benefits for 35 years and filed at 65 was $26.39. It was subject to cost of living, and if they did wait, it would be worth more if they waited subsequently down the road. And ultimately then, if you don't work a full 35 years, how are you impacted? They'll plug in zeros for any of the partial time or the whole years where you didn't have earnings, and that'll just be added into your calculation. So how does it impact somebody with 34 years or 33 years? You'll get 1 or 2 years of zero. So if you're if you're contemplating, should I take it now, should I retire now? You can run this report and look at it both ways, taking it now versus working 2 more years. We can show you the difference. And then you can figure out, will I have health care or am I have to pay for it? And we can help you with that as well. And you can look back at what the county may offer you as well and your employees. So just some backdrop on that. And then at the bottom, ssa.gov/myaccount, that's where you can go to generate your report and to have access to it so that if you want to run a report from Nationwide, we can provide you then with your up to 4 options. File early, file max, any 2 points in between. And it gives you access to it 24/7. And then now that we know what the X is, and I've told you how you determine the Y is based on when you're born. I like the example of 1957. It's not too bad. Yeah, it does require 6 toes, right? So you have to take 2 shoes off. But if you're born in February of 1957, what month do you fully attain? What month do you attain your full retirement age? Calendar month. It's August. So if you February 1957, take a look. 66 and 6 months, right? August, right? So if you filed in February, if that was you, thinking you have a sibling who was born in 1954 and he or she filed at 66 and you didn't pay attention to your statement, did you receive 100% of your benefit? The answer is no, right? And you've lost out on other options as well. So February 1957, you wait till August, now you're receiving your primary insurance amount, which is the amount that you receive monthly if you file for your benefit at full retirement age. And that's how that works. The other thing then is, as I mentioned earlier, file early, it's reduced. File at full retirement age, 100%, bottom of that page, on page 9. And file later, there's a simple 8% credit each year, 1/12 of 8% per month. And so each of those gradient steps have a calculation month to month to month to month. Early on, it's not a simple percentage. It's actually a calculation, a fractional calculation, and it changes the closer you get to full retirement age. Our calculator can determine that for you. But the simple math then is simply 1/12 of 8% for every month that you wait. So if your full retirement age is 66 and you wait until 67 and a half, do the math there, you're getting 112% of your primary insurance amount because you're picking up an extra 4% for 6 months and so on. That's how that works. And then how did Jim and Linda do so much better by waiting? Because Jim and Linda increased their benefit by 76%. Yes, Jim had to fall asleep every night realizing he was giving up income for 8 years. But what he was counting on was having so much more over a shorter period of time that he would hit a break-even point because he was healthy, and the longer he lived, the more he'd be rewarded for waiting. But again, predicated upon the fact that he didn't need the income, he either was working or had access to other sources to generate income before that. And some people can do that. You can actually turn on your 401k, your 457, your IRA, your non-qualified dollars, set aside so many years of income, and then turn on your Social Security later, and then slow down what you were doing there and preserve your assets that way. A lot of ways you can do this. Our goal is to help you figure out what your options are. And then for me, full retirement age, anybody else born in 1960 or later, you'll see here we're now at 70% because an extra year of filing early discounted was added. And we're only up to 124% because one less year is available to us for delayed credits. And so my maximum benefit, if I was expecting $1,000, would be $1,240, where Jim had $1,320. And it goes on from there. But still, not bad. A 77% increase from taking as early as possible. My question is, am I convinced, number one, I don't need it? Am I convinced, number two, I'm going to live long enough? And number three, do I really want to do that? And what makes the most sense for me and for my wife in this case? All right, so that gives you some idea of what goes into crunching the numbers for each of us. The main takeaway there is that understanding that they present value our earnings from the past. And that's why if all I ever did was earn $16,000 a year, in actuality, my benefit would still be calculated on much more than that because $16,000 30 years ago is worth a heck of a lot more today. So just to help you understand that. And then we offer a lot of different filing options for the purposes of time today and just education today, knowing that in a 1 hour session that we're not going to make anybody an expert here. Our real goal is for you to walk away knowing the depth of the resources, the fact that some of this information doesn't even matter to you because you may not be the person who is divorced or married. You may not be the person who is deceased or and so on and so on. So what's nice about this really is when you bring this back to your counties, when you run it for yourself, all the options that don't make sense for you, the thousands of rules, hundreds of options, they don't matter. What really matters to you is, based on your situation, what filing options matter the most for you. And we really then begin to personalize this for you individually or as a couple. Right? So that's what's important. So we can talk about things like if you're dealing with a disability. We could talk about things like, do you have eligible dependents at home? When I was in college, back in the 80s, right, the Stone Age, I had a good friend in college whose dad passed away prematurely, and she had a dependent benefit up through 21. That's changed now. It's only up to 18 or 19 if you're still in high school. But that's what a dependent benefit is. If a parent passes, there's a potential then for an eligible dependent at home. If one of your situations, if that's an employee situation, we can help them through those very challenging set of circumstances to understand what might be available to their family. Then, of course, the more popular ones, for you if you're a spouse, or your spouse if you're married, if you're divorced and or if you're the divorcee, however you want to look at it, then ultimately, what if one of you has lost a spouse or concerned about predeceasing a spouse, how will it impact them? This becomes a very good planning tool, and the benefits for all of those are somewhat different. The two that are most related are spousal and divorce, and we'll talk about that. Let's move away from thinking about filing for our own benefit for a minute. We talk about the spouse. You're now the spouse, or you're thinking of the spouse, who wants to file off of their spouse's record. And why would somebody do that? Because typically it's going to result in a larger benefit for them. Example, if my benefit is $2,400 and my wife's is $1,100, half of mine is greater. Right? So spousal says if you're married for at least a year, if you're at least 62 and your spouse has filed, then you can file for a benefit off of them. And when you do file, you're either going to receive yours or up to half of theirs, whichever is greater. Spousal says you can receive up to half of your spouse's primary insurance amount, meaning if my primary insurance amount is $2,400, then my wife can have up to half of that. Regardless of when I file, that's my number at full retirement age. So if Heather, my wife, waited until her full retirement age, she'd received the full 50%. Because the same principles that apply to you and me individually also apply to spouses or surviving spouses. The earlier you file for a benefit, what? The less of it you receive. So if Heather filed for a spousal benefit at 62, she would not get 50%, she'd get less. If she filed at 64, she wouldn't get 60%, but she'd get more than if she would have filed at 62. Does that make sense? The closer you move in to full retirement age to take your benefit, whether it's yours or someone else's, the more you receive. So rule of thumb here, 62, 1 year, spouse is married, you file for up to half of theirs. The earlier you file, the less you get. But you'll receive either yours or up to half of theirs, whichever is greater, depending on when you file. And you're deemed to file for all of your benefits. Yours won't continue to grow. This is not restricted. I'll explain restricted differently in a little bit. Then we have surviving spouse. In this case, yes, question. No, we can all file at 62 if we're eligible. So 62 is initial eligibility, and so you have to be at least 62 either as the spouse or as the other spouse to file initially. And here come the caveats. However, let's say I'm disabled and I'm collecting, but I'm not 62, but my wife is. She can file off of me because I'm being treated as having filed. So the question here, though, is let's focus on the spouse who's filing off of the other spouse. The other spouse has to have filed, and this spouse has to be at least 62. Okay? Good question. Thank you. Surviving spouse is different. Married, not as long, right? 9 months instead of a year. Benefits can be taken as early as 60. Earlier, if there are dependent children in the home. Again, give us the details and we'll show you what's available. For example, if my wife was 55 and we had dependents at home who were young enough to be eligible, well, she can receive a benefit while they're receiving benefits. But if they age out before she reaches 60, then her benefit would stop. Until then, she reaches age 60. A lot to go into this. It makes the room spin, I know. We'll try to reverse the spin in a few minutes. But ultimately, what do you receive if you're the surviving spouse? Yours or your spouse's benefit, whichever is greater. So here's my trick question. I preface it in a room of astute attendees here. I'm prefacing with trick questions, so don't answer it the way you think you should answer it. Answer it the way I'm leading you to answer it. So you are a surviving spouse, and your benefit is $2,200 a month. And if you would have taken your spouse's benefit instead, it was $2,100 a month. Which one should you take? And you're only 63. What do you think? Thank you. Exactly right. What would most people think on their own? I'm taking the larger benefit for the rest of my life, right? What they don't realize, which you caught on to, is that if I'm under full retirement age and I'm taking my spouse's survivor benefit, whether it's more or less, mine still grows. So what our tool, until 70. So what our tool will do is some people, the difference may be so much where it'll never catch up, and you may want to just take the larger benefit, take the survivor benefit. But there may be a time where taking the survivor benefit makes the most sense and letting yours continue to grow. So again, you give us good information in, we'll give you good information out, but thank you. But that's where we're going with that, so I appreciate it. Okay, for divorced spouses, the eligibility is different, but the payouts are the same as being a spouse or a surviving spouse, meaning for a divorced spouse, depending on when you file, you can receive up to half of primary insurance amount, or for a surviving ex-spouse, depending on whether you were married or not, you can receive yours or your spouse's, whichever is greater. So those benefits can be available to a surviving spouse. However, for that surviving spouse to have access to that death benefit, so to speak, they have to have had remarried after age 60, and the sequence of who passes away will have an impact on that as well. Let me give an example. And again, either spousal, which is up to half, or survivor, which is the larger of the two. And there's no impact on any of this, meaning if you remarry and your ex-spouse is wondering, will anything the two of you do impact your ex-spouse? I'm sorry, if your new spouse is wondering, will anything you do impact your ex-spouse? Or if your ex-spouse is wondering, what will you remarrying do to them? Nothing at all. It all happens independently of one another. So there are no techniques for anybody to use other than for what works for them as opposed to against somebody else. That's the good news, right? Yes?
So both your wife and your ex-wife could have benefits without any impact on each other?
That's correct. Think Johnny Carson and 4 ex-wives of Joanna Jones, right? They can all collect off of him regardless. Now, if any of those ex-wives remarried, they can no longer be tied back to Johnny Carson for a spousal benefit. But, and here's a case with my mom. My mom and dad were married, long time. They divorced. My mom remarried after age 60. My dad, for anybody who's from New Jersey and remembers Brick Church, my dad was an appliance salesman in New Jersey for a long time. My stepdad owned a limousine business. Guess which one had more cash income? Not my dad, but my stepdad. Right? Guess which one had a smaller Social Security benefit? My stepdad. When my mom remarried, she lost a spousal benefit from my dad. She now had a smaller benefit from my stepdad. My dad passed away. My mom was still tied to my stepdad. My stepdad passed away. Guess what happened? My mom's surviving benefit automatically went back to my dad's. Because when she remarried after age 60. So there's some caveats there. And it happened automatically. You don't have to know it. I'll tell you the absolute honest truth. Well, my mom did when it happened. She called me and said, can you think of any reason why my Social Security benefit would have gone up? And at that time, I didn't know. I said, I'm not sure. Do you want to make a call? She goes, no, we're not going to call anybody and let them know my Social Security benefit went up. As they say down south where I live now in Virginia, bless her soul, right? So, but a Jersey guy, I had to learn to say those types of things, right? So anyway, that being said, again, if this is your situation, whatever, we can help you with that, right? So ultimately, working and taking Social Security, the way most people think about it is it's a penalty, and you lose it and never get it back. My father-in-law, right? You do stuff long enough, you have stories in the family, right? And you worry about what they tell about you, right? So my father-in-law retired from his job full-time and went to work for them part-time. Wanted to take his benefits at 62 and didn't want to lose them because he didn't know how long he was going to live, and he thought that was stupid that he'd lose his benefits after earning them. Had no idea in 2000. I didn't know in 2000. So what I've learned, though, is that the operative word is withheld because there is only one way you wouldn't get your benefits back, and that is simply if you die too soon. Here's how it works. Let's start with the far right-hand column. By the way, would you double check for me? Is the page on this 18 or 19 maybe? I think it's either on page 18 or 19 in the kit at the bottom of the page. Working and collecting Social Security, is that right? No? Yes. Page, what is it? 18. So on 18, at the bottom, and these numbers will be indexed again for 2017, but conceptually, full retirement age and beyond. So let's go back to that person born in February of 1957. We established their full retirement age will be attained in August, right? So that's August, full retirement age. The middle column is January because it's the year of attaining full retirement age, so day one of year one, that year. The first column is any year prior to that when they're eligible, 62 or older, and they're working. The way it works is early on, if you earn more than $13.10 per month, they're going to withhold $1 for every $2 above that from your benefit. But it's being withheld. Set it in this fictitious account up here, right? So we're holding that for deferred payments in the future. So that goes on for years and years, months and months. Now you reach January, you're earning $34.90 or more. Everything above that is 1 for every 3. So you can earn more and withheld, less is withheld. So obviously those who earn more, collecting may not be the right thing to do, right? And that's what our tool can help you figure out. Ultimately now you have this numerator of total withheld. Then you have a denominator which is your life expectancy in months. Do the math and come up with a dollar amount. That dollar amount at full retirement age is added back into your benefit. So if you're expecting $2,000 a month and now you see a check for $2,018 a month, it's because, making up a number, right? Whatever that number is actually now reinstituted and added back into your benefit as long as you live. If you pass away and that's a larger benefit, that number goes to your spouse. Every year you earn a cost living increase, it's on top of that new number. So it's truly withheld and then truly added back in, and it is fully part of your benefit going forward. Any questions on that? Yeah, so here's my quiz on this one. Who doesn't get it all back? The person who doesn't what? live to full life expectancy, right? Who gets it all back? That person who does. Who gets more back? The person who lives to life expectancy and beyond. Not bad, right? Pretty good. All right, so the takeaway from this, forget the numbers for now, just simply, if you want to work and collect, we can help you calculate how much of your benefit will survive short term, and then how much you'll get back long term. For those who earn too much, collecting doesn't make sense because you can be down to no benefit at all. For those who are working and need extra and there's money left to give you some, meaning if someone's making $1,400 a month, they're going to have a sizable benefit left. They need it. We can figure out what the reduction is going to be and then how much they'll get back when they need it in the future. So that being said, let's move into the last part of this, and this is ultimately the so what. How can we help you? How can we help your employees, help your participants? And it's pretty straightforward. You need to print out your statement. Once you have your earnings statement, tell us about you, and submit the questionnaire to Nationwide, and within 1 to 3 business days, that'll be emailed back to you directly. If you want to talk to our folks back out in the field and schedule time with them, those who call on your counties, your agencies, and so on, they will be able to walk you through the details and help you understand what it means. They can also show you back online when you get into the interactive retirement plan or different tools, how that can dovetail nicely into your income plan for the future. And again, not only you, but think about the folks that are working for you and with you that can use that benefit as well. So once you give us good information, we'll provide you with up to 4 options. We'll provide you with exact instructions on how and when to file based on each of those options individually. And ultimately, I'm going to end on this with showing you how you can layer that over into your overall financial plan. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we're not an agency of the administration. The output really relies on the information going in. I'll leave it out there just for a moment. And as things change, you can always run the report again and we'll update it for you. So in the kit in the back, when you get home or back to your hotel room, or if you go out with Carlos later and have a few drinks, maybe tomorrow instead, as you want to read through this, there's a full report in there. Let me show you the key highlights. Number 1, there's a fact finder behind it. This fact finder is what you would fill out to generate the report. I will show you that in a moment. Number 2, we'll show you the 4 options for you. Based on the 2 options that you're going to receive automatically, and any 2 you pick in between, we will help you figure out what those dollar amounts will be so you can start making your decisions. Number 3, break even. What this tells us is that for Jim and Linda, where it says suggested in the legend, upper right-hand corner, if Jim made it to 86, his full retirement age, his life expectancy was 85, right? If Jim makes it to 86 and Linda makes it to 85 and hers was 88, and they opted for the suggested, they would have been better off. They would have been better off filing later. However, if they had any concern they wouldn't live that long, taking the earliest or the alternative would have worked better for them. Again, we'll show you those for you. We're showing 3 on there, could be up to 4. Then we'll give you instructions for each of the options that we run for you, early, later, and in between, and when to file, and what your benefits would be then. And then finally, you tell us your target income. This example here, we use $50,000. Take the average couple working in the plan. You have someone working for the county, take household income of $50,000. They're targeting that. They're working until they're collecting beginning in 2017. And there's a gap there between what they need in retirement and what Social Security will provide based on how they're filing. 4 different bar charts. The numbers could be larger, smaller, depending on the options. But what this does is that's where our program directors and their retirement specialists can sit down with participants, with you, and then look at the other income you're going to be generating from the 457, any other retirement assets that you have that we can then build into this and get you closer to that line. The inflation is also based on your estimation as well. It could be 1%, 2%, 3%, you name it. That's a 3% growth number on there. And then the second line there is supposed to be a goldenrod, but it looks green here. That would be first to die if there's an income level then targeted for that surviving spouse. What would that be? And again, are there pension dollars? Is there a life insurance policy that can create income? All those things will help you integrate that all together for a comprehensive plan. Last thing, and then we'll open up for questions and dismiss. How do you complete the form and where does it go? The actual form is in the kit. What you see at the very top in the upper right-hand corner are the phone numbers, email addresses, and fax numbers. You can submit this any one of those 3 different ways. Phone number is there in case you have questions on it as well once you've submitted it. Get that to Nationwide, sign the very top, give us permission to run it for you. It goes nowhere but back to you. Nationwide won't risk our relationship with you, with your county, with the public, and so on and so on. So our privacy policy is in the sample report. Once you tell us about you and who to send it to, now what we want to know here is ultimately who are you and where are we going to send this? This looks like the wrong fact finder. Let me see what's going on here. Come on. Up, there we go. We're good. Okay. Before you begin, obviously have that report. If the participants and employees forget where to find it, it's listed on here as well. And once they've got that, give us their marital status. Beneath that, then tell us about themselves. Are they collecting already? When do they want to start collecting? Or do they have a pension that might be offset? All those types of things. If married, you turn it over. Same thing for the spouse. Come on up there. And then in those situations where you have someone either widowed or divorced, we ask for that information as well. People tend to ask at that point, what if I can't find that information? Or what if my ex-spouse isn't forthcoming with the information, so on and so on. Contact the administration directly, schedule an appointment, bring in whatever proof you have, either of death, the CD, or of marriage or divorce, whatever you can, and they'll pull the data for you. Once you get that to complete this, get it to us, and then we'll have that run for you in its entirety. So let me conclude with my comments there. We have a few minutes here. We have a couple of questions. I see David walking with the mic, and Carlos has one here as well. Yes. So thank you very much for your attention today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Is there a fee for this service?
No, I tell everybody the only cost is the time it takes to do it or not to do it, right? There's an opportunity cost not finding it out. And the reason Nationwide does this is it's our commitment to the partnerships to help participants make better decisions and prepare for retirement. And so it's just our way of saying if you're working with Nationwide, more than just servicing the plan, we want to also provide value like this to help service the participants.
So if I were to take this back to our HR people and say, distribute this to our 2,000 employees, and they fill it out and submit it to you, that would be free of cost to them.
There's no additional cost whatsoever for that. Correct.
And that's okay, because I'm going to do that.
We encourage that.
Okay, thanks.
We definitely encourage that. So somebody make note of that. I want to know. What state are you in? Nebraska. Wonderful. Excellent. Thank you very much. Yes. I thought that was going to be maybe a Survivor microphone race there. There you go. Yes.
Is there any amount of passive income that is factored into this?
With regards to working and collecting things like that,
right.
The only income that would subject your Social Security benefit reduction because of earnings is FICA-based income, so anything you're paying Social Security on. Any other income, passive, other investment properties, whatever it happens to be, if it's not W-2 based and FICA eligible, it does not impact the reduction, benefit reduction. Yes. Other questions? Yes. Hi.
What is the maximum you can make an income before you have to go through the reduction?
I don't know the numbers yet for 2017. I don't have them memorized. But each year they're indexed and they go up a little bit, generally speaking. So, we had 1,500 and something and then 34 something. There'll be a little more than that for next year. But what we'll do is, especially for all the counties where we've got access to bring these in, once we have those numbers, we'll get them out to everybody. And David, if you want to just make note of that, that'd be great. Excellent. Yes, in the back, in the center. There he is.
Yeah, I had a conversation with a couple other commissioners earlier, and there was a talk. We were talking about We spent most of our time in the private sector, and now we're a short-term, PERS. Now, how does that affect the Social Security income? We're led to believe that you might want to file for Social Security first, get that going, and then collect your PERS. If you do the PERS first, then they ding you for that income for your Social Security.
So, if I understand correctly, on the pension that you are part of, you're not paying Social Security on that one. Is that correct?
No.
Right. So.
But I spent
Right, in private sector.
50
Right, yeah.
years in the public.
No, yeah, absolutely. So, without providing advice, which I can't do, but to answer your question, whenever you become eligible for, in some cases where you don't have a choice, pensions start. Every county is different, right? But if you have control over when you file for that pension, you can delay those reductions until you file for that pension, but once you do, going forward, you'll be subject to the reduction, the calculation. So yes. Thanks. Others? Well, I have a question for everyone. You came in looking for Social Security information. Was this helpful? You think, okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, my ask is ultimately then, if you're interested enough, one of the things I always ask everybody is if you want to bring it back, run it on yourself and let us help you become even more familiar with it, so when you get back to present it, you have a chance to really show them in greater detail why it's compelling. So thank you very much, everybody. Carlos?
Thanks, Carlo. I appreciate that. So as you guys see, this is a very personal decision if you're single, and it's a partnership decision if you're actually married. And then it becomes a complex situation because you're adding in other benefits that makes a difference here. So we want to make sure that you get what you need from a complementary standpoint, just like you asked, to make sure not only do you get this information, but all of your employees or participants get this information as well. So again, I'll be up here if you have any questions, and we just want to thank you for attending the Social Security Workshop this afternoon. Enjoy the rest of the conference.